Hi, I'm Dr. Rodney Taveira, a lecturer in American Studies at the United States Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. And joining me today is a former student who made his way through the American Studies program, amongst other things, Remy Numa, who's now working in political research for a quite big media company in New York City. Thank you for joining us.
It's great to see you again.
You too. It's been a little while. It's been a couple of years, I guess.
Has, yeah.
Gone on to bigger and better things, perhaps.
Look, I wouldn't put it that way. I miss Australia, but it's been an exciting couple of years, particularly in the political space, and obviously we had a pretty major election in 2022, and it was exciting to be part of that.
That was a pretty big one.
It was one of the more eventful ones, I would say.
But before we get to that,
Yeah.
You obviously started your career in education as a primary school student, but then a high school student. And I assume you had lots of options when you had finished your HSC on where you might further your education somewhere in Sydney or even overseas or in another state. So what is it that made you decide to come to the University of Sydney?
Yeah, I think there were options available, and there's options available to everybody. The university here, I think more than any other, just offers a wide variety of courses, and if you have a niche interest, you can pursue it here where you probably couldn't pursue it elsewhere. So I think that's the first element. The second element is that, when you're researching universities, you want to look at who's actually teaching there. What are the faculty? What's their experience? And if you can hear from other people that have gone through the university experience as well, whether they're friends, family members, whatever, and hear about what the classes were like every day. Did you learn something that you didn't expect? Were you, motivated to learn more than just what the course required? And I think I had a feeling at the time, and it was confirmed through going through the degrees at the University of Sydney, that those teachers, those lecturers, professors were able to do that. And so that, again, you don't know that going in, but I had a feeling and it was confirmed.
Oh, great. That's great to hear. And continuing that line of thought about what the teachers can offer you, the kind of research that is done here, how did you react to American Studies when you first took a class?
Yeah, look, I was really excited that this centre exists. And again, to your previous question, I mean, this is a pretty unique centre in Sydney and in Australia. So I guess I was really just excited to be able to get into it. And what I really enjoyed about, I guess, the first American Studies class, but also just right through the major, was it didn't matter whether you were interested in America from a cultural standpoint, a political standpoint, whether you were interested in, I remember one of the essays I wrote for you was about the sustainability of late night television from like a business standpoint, and that was what was exciting to me, was whatever you were interested in, as long as you were, doing the readings, engaging with the class, you could kind of go in those directions and ask those questions and also write to those sort of areas of interest. And so that was something I picked up right away. And again, it was nice to see that continue throughout the entire major.
Oh, it's great to hear you got that out of it.
No, I did.
I got a great essay out of it from you, so thank you.
Anytime.
So what sparked your interest in American Studies in the first place?
So I was born in the States, and I think, my parents were working there for a couple of years in Los Angeles. I came along during that. And at the end of that, they decided to move back to Australia for a whole bunch of reasons. But I do think at some level, instinctively, I always missed being there. And I didn't know that obviously as a kid, but as you grow up and you watch American TV and you read American books and you engage in American politics, right? The field that I'm in now, political research and analysis, was all born out of watching the coverage and reading articles in the major papers. And I think it just sort of grew from there. I mean, always loved, Australian politics and Australian elections, but there's something just more exciting about the US environment, in that, America is, I still firmly believe, the leader of the free world. And the decisions that are made there have a really tangible impact, not just on the people of the United States, but also on our country, on Asia Pacific, on Europe. I mean, we've seen that demonstrated so many times over the last few years. We're seeing it right now with Ukraine. So I think that was where the interest was really born out of, was engaging with that, engaging with that media from a young age and just getting more and more interested in it as time went on.
So you've got this kind of almost burning interest in the United States, which is both personal and related to the place of the US in relation to the rest of the world. You decided upon the University of Sydney, and the United States Studies Centre is a part of what attracts you to the University of Sydney. How did you feel when you first got here? Was there something that you wish you knew before you got to university?
Definitely. I mean, many things, some of which are probably not for this video, but I will say that the biggest thing was, I think especially, a lot of people who are going to come to the university have done really well in high school and have worked really hard, and that's something to be really proud of. But because there's that sort of instinctive pressure that goes along with that I've got to perform, I've got to be at the top of my league. University is a different ballgame. And I was lucky in doing the IB that I had a bit of an understanding of essay writing and critical thinking, where I think, that was something that the IB really emphasized. But as you well know, as someone who, have introduced many students to university life and university academia, I think the biggest thing is, you have to understand that it's okay if you're not performing at the absolute top from day one, right? It's a whole new mode of thinking. It's a whole new mode of instruction and of learning. And I think, I did fine in the first couple of months. I wasn't, feeling like I was totally out of my depth. But you do start to get this feeling of, well, I'm not performing quite as well as I was before. Does that mean I'm just a total failure, right? And I think at the time, had I known that that's understandable and in fact common, right?
Absolutely.
Then I don't think I would have been as frustrated by whatever lack of progress is in I was doing 2 degrees, and so there were law subjects that were really hard, and I wish I'd known that it was okay that they were hard, and that you just got to keep plugging away at it. There were so many students in both degrees, in the media and American studies course and in the law course, who didn't necessarily have the best start, but turned out to be incredible students and have gone on to, incredible accomplishments in their careers. So, I think that was definitely the biggest takeaway for me. And all the obvious stuff, right? Make friends, go to the functions, join the clubs, the stuff you're hearing everywhere. But that especially, I think, was what stood out to me.
So there were some clubs or societies that you joined?
Yeah, definitely. And you can create your own too.
That's true.
We did a media project. There's great, like the debating club was something I wish I'd spent more time in, actually, because I loved doing that in high school, but it's a really vibrant club here. There are societies associated with the course you're doing. There was a MECO society. Really enjoyed being part of the law society. So, it's not that you have to, again, be the organizer or, sort of the leader of any of these things, especially to start with, but just going, right? And putting yourself out there a bit. You'll find that, the other person is just as nervous about putting themselves out there too, with a whole new audience, right? And to the extent that you can, connect with friends from previous lives, whether it was high school or somewhere you grew up or whatever, if you can sort of rekindle those relationships a little bit, you'll find that it's easier to do together. It's not necessary, but it's a nice addition to have if you can.
So a new student in this kind of rather big transition from high school to university can take advantage of these almost kind of horizontal connections that you can make with societies and clubs and other students who are in a similar position to you. Did you feel supported perhaps in a almost vertical way from, say, the lecturers or tutors? I just made up a new class of teacher, the tutorer, or other stuff.
Folks, you really want to get to know those tutors.
Yeah.
Those are the best ones.
They're the best ones. There's only one of them. It's me. Did you feel supported by, say, staff at the United States Studies Centre?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no question about that. And again, I think it's sort of a give and get thing, right? If you're someone who's going to the classes, even just asking questions, right? They don't even have to be particularly good questions.
Please ask questions. Please.
I know.
Tutor will thank you.
I can tell that tutors and tutors both demand question asking. But it makes the class more interesting, right? Obviously, do the readings, engage with the content that's actually on offer. But even if you're not quite sure what you're talking about, or you're not understanding something, or you just have an interesting question, you should ask it. But I think, it's all connected, right? If you're asking questions and you're showing up to the classes and you're interested, at least at a broad level in the material that's on offer, it's much easier then at the end of the class to say, hey, I'm really struggling with this particular aspect of the course, or perhaps I'm really struggling just with life, right? I mean, what we were joking about before, university is a huge transition, right?
Yeah.
And having someone who's gone through it, can be really helpful. Like, how do I find my own place to live? I am learning how to, whatever it might be. Obviously, there's lots of different places to go for that. But if you can develop a really strong relationship with like the academic staff, it can be helpful for the academic side, but it can also be helpful just to, get to know somebody and their life and get advice from them about living it.
So you forge these relationships with your lecturers and your tutors, and you develop as really a scholar through your time in your undergraduate years, kind of not floundering, but sort of working your way out to begin with.
Yeah.
And then you develop these, particular special interests, say in American studies, in the media part of your degree. How did American studies prepare you for your professional life after university?
Yeah. It's interesting because I went to America, right? And I think one of the things that you miss, and particularly in my field where I'm doing political research and analysis really every day, a lot of my job is understanding states and understanding different voters and what their preferences are, and how candidates are performing and whether they're resonating with those voters. That's a lot of what we deal with, right? And the interesting thing for me was, I think without the American Studies degree, the people that I'm working with have lived this their entire lives, right? They grew up in the election of 2008. They grew up in every, in every sort of major political event, 2016, every major political event over their last sort of 20, 25 years in my case.
Grew up in America.
Right. That's the point. They don't have to, find a way to watch, cable news from overseas. They just turn on the TV, right? Or, they're talking about it with their friends because all their friends are experiencing it at the same time. Their classes are dealing with it even at the high school level, right? And so what was, on just a very practical level, the best thing about the American Studies degree was that I had an understanding, yes, an outsider's perspective, and yes, not quite the same sort of lived experience, but I had a really good understanding of American politics and American society because of this degree. And I think the last point is, in some ways it was actually better because I am an outsider, right? In that context, at least. And so, it was easier for me to see, well, I think you're actually seeing it this way because you're super partisan or because of that particular life experience, and you can have those conversations. I'm able to compare the US system to other political systems around the world because I've lived in one, and so I think you end up with a much better exchange of ideas because you're listening to their lived experience and they're listening to yours, and you can meet in the middle and in a much more interesting place.
So it sounds like in your sort of post-university career, you've navigated quite a few different fields, and you were navigating that while you were at university as well. And I just wonder if, American studies as an interdisciplinary pursuit might have sort of helped you do that you are approaching, say, a single subject from a number of different angles. I wonder if that bore out when you were leaving university too.
No, absolutely. And I think, what we were talking about before, you could look at a subject from a business angle, from a political angle. You could look at it from a cultural angle, which was, I learned a lot about analyzing a country's culture, right? In a systematic way, in a methodical way, where I hadn't before, through the US Studies Center. And so every single element of that has been useful in first of all, figuring out what I'm actually interested in and what I want to do in life. But secondly, when you're part of that job or when you're in the environment you choose to go into, you can look at things from multiple angles and multiple perspectives, where, somebody who hasn't gone through this experience is a little more limited.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're pretty well prepared to take on the rather stellar endeavors that you did after you left us and went to the United States. But was there something about the transition to work from university, similarly from moving from high school to university, moving from university into your professional life, was there something you wish you knew beforehand you go back and tell Remy you really need to concentrate on?
Well, again, stuff that wouldn't fit into this video, right? Going back to what I said before, one of the biggest things is, I wish I had more money. But as I said, probably not a conversation that we should have here. Look, obviously there's practical considerations like that. I think the biggest one is, again, I moved to America at the beginning of COVID. I didn't have a lot of money. I had to find a place, had to make sure there was enough coming in, all that sort of stuff. Those big considerations, were practically complicated, but look, they're a little emotionally complicated because you're unsure of yourself and your place in the world. What you have to realize is it's exactly the same transition as last time, right? And so what's great about, I think, the university to work transition versus the previous one is you realize I've been through this before and I got there.
Yep.
And so that's the biggest thing is obviously, figuring out how to be more organized, figuring out how to, make sure you get to work and do the job that's required. Figuring out, what the career path looks like, not being too sort of beholden to what your current job is and always pushing for more to the extent that you think you can perform that job capably. But yeah, just knowing, I think that you've had challenges before and you'll have challenges again, but so far so good. For the most part, you learn every day and you try to become a better person and a more capable person. As long as you're doing that, I think things seem to work out.
Yeah, that's great and sage advice. And on that great and sage advice, I want to thank you for coming in today and talking to us about your time here at the US Studies Centre at the University of Sydney and what you've done since then. So thanks again.
An absolute pleasure. And Professor, thank you for all of your advice and for all your brilliant lessons as well.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
Much.